Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures That Outperform. I'm Frank Wander. I'm the founder of People Productive and Boardroom Edge. I'm here with George Pace, my co-host today. Terry, unfortunately, couldn't be with us. She is traveling and on business, so it's going to be George and I this week and next week. So today we're really covering enterprise-wide AI transformation. What does it cost? I think this is the major question. Companies are out there doing the experimental phase, looking at little things, learning. But the real question is, what does AI transformation, enterprise-wide AI transformation cost, and how can you get to figuring out what that is? And so today we're going to take a look at that. And we have a show built around that. We're going to go through a number of different models. We've talked about, George and I spent a lot of time going through this and said, how can we give people a recipe to figure out what it's going to cost for them? Because transformations are expensive and they're risky. And in fact, most enterprise transformations don't really work out all that well. You can look at all the statistics and data. There are a lot of underlying issues that get in the way that companies haven't addressed. So we're going to talk about those. Here is a model that identifies all the major cost drivers of enterprise trust. And George, I don't want to be the hog here, so
that's okay.
Turn it over to you, buddy.
So, at the end of the day, the idea of coming up with a structure or a template really got us into this, idea of a formula. And there's no singular thing that if you just spent money on one thing, it magically fixes all of the other problems. So categorically, what we've done in this episode is we've come up with the definition or the structured template, shall we say, and we're going to, in future episodes, we're going to go through each one of these columns, as it were, each one of these foundations, and derive what would make up the cost specific to that component. So we're not even starting on this per se this week, in so much as we're starting to talk about the general pattern that we're going to use to then pour the information in for each one of these topics.
Yeah, that's very important. I think that's what we walked away with, actually.
Yeah.
Is that we had to actually go back and start to really talk about what does AI transformation cost mean. So we have those 5 buckets, but we learned something talking about this. So we can derive a transformation recipe, but the ingredients are really company specific. And we're going to talk about that as well. We want to get this common list of ingredients out there so that you can begin to analyze what is it going to cost to be successful doing your enterprise-wide AI transformation. And George had suggested using AI agents as a lens through which we could validate this recipe and say, does this really hold water? Is it going to work for all these different topics and categories that are the major cost drivers? And we think the answer is yes. Yep. And George, I'm hogging again. Why don't you take the play?
That's okay. So the challenge here is this is going to be tough love. I'll say it as bluntly as I can. The challenge is that change is tough and change is hard, and different people react to change in different ways. And the last bullet here is the one that really resonated, in that there's typically a resistance, and the resistance can happen anywhere within an organization. But the challenge is that you need to understand your current state needs to change or needs to adapt to this new world of how do you introduce this technology, specifically AI, so that you're getting consistent results. That's the goal. And the problem is, the more you resist changes to your organization, it's going to be very hard to get to that a successful endpoint. And that's going to be seen in the next slide.
The early experimentation is going to be easy. Any individual can go in and use generative AI to create a document, go, oh, wow, look what I created. But as you begin to go into the whole enterprise, this starts to get a lot more complex, especially as you can do things that are more complex. And so we've got 4 columns here. We've got a set of readiness factors, the key ingredients that you're going to have to master to drive it, what are good ingredients, and what are the substandard ones.
So the thing to take away from this is that template we're going to use over the course of the next several weeks. And what is applicable to your organization is based on a ton of factors. We may not get to all of them, but is it your size? Where are you in the maturation curve? How much money have you already invested? There's a lot that only you can determine for your organization. But thematically, as we talk about each one of these sections, there's a cost of either doing it or engaging on that topic, and there's a cost of not engaging on it. And this is going to be the template to help guide that conversation.
Yeah, so let's take the first column here. Readiness factors. Readiness drives your level of investment and varies by company. So yes, you're going to have to really think about this and understand what your current state is at your company. And that's going to drive the level of investment required to do a real enterprise-wide AI transformation, not to have some little successes in different places, but to attack this holistically, because you're going to have to move up the learning curve, just like companies tried to do for digital transformation. Maybe bounce back and forth on these.
Yeah, and well, then the final three on those readiness factors, and we were really adjusting this slide most of today, is there's going to be three ways to basically assess where you're at. Are you fully baked that, the ideas and the quality ingredients are what your organization is doing today, versus all the way down to uncooked, which is, is this something that's, a vision or a goal for your enterprise to get to? So initially we tried high, medium, low. That didn't work as well. So really think about where you're at as we go through these dimensions based on that rating of fully baked, partially baked, and uncooked. And then obviously you're going to group these after all is said and done. And you can focus on those things, I would guess, in the uncooked and partially baked categories to begin coming up with a plan of attack as to where your organization begins to need to make changes to, get to that ideal state.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, we're going to be covering this over a period of a few episodes. And so we're going to cover three of these ingredients today. We're going to take a look at capacity to change, ruthless prioritization, and institutional knowledge. These are big.
You can start with institutional knowledge, Frank. That's your biggie.
Okay. All right. Institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge, you can see here, quality ingredients. Deep institutional knowledge is highly valued and grown. Or the productive power of institutional knowledge is not understood. Most enterprises are all the way over on the right. They don't understand the productive power of institutional knowledge. It's not understood. As we looked at turnover in different companies, as we were helping them do culture transformations, and we calculated the cost of turnover, the single largest cost was actually people moving up the learning curve to acquire the institutional knowledge they needed to perform that particular role. And so institutional knowledge is acquired at great cost. And actually institutional knowledge is also acquired based on certain aptitudes people have. And so there are people who have learning agility. They move up learning curves really fast. And, there's 4 levels of competence when you look at competency doing things. And you get from people who have no clue how much they don't know. They call it, basically unconsciously incompetent. Like, I don't have a clue how much I have to learn. It goes all the way up to this unconsciously competent, which is, I know it so well. It's second knowledge. I don't have to think about it. And companies do not value institutional knowledge. What they value is the cost of a resource per hour. And for years, they've shredded institutional knowledge in these companies. And for that reason, they can't move quickly. They don't have people who really understand how things work under the surface. Most things are black box to them. They know a few things. And this becomes super important with AI, where you're going to have to build trust around the answers. And we'll talk about how you do that, but that certainly is going to require real institutional knowledge of how things actually work and how that works. And so this is a major impediment to companies being successful, and it's one of the root causes of failure when you look at digital transformation.
And remember what's critical in AI. If we take this, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to the data strategy piece of this, but at the end of the day, there's data, there's information that is locked in those systems. And in order to make sure you have an effective AI deployment or solution, you really need to understand the data and the business rules that are buried in those legacy systems. And if you've basically gotten rid of that institutional knowledge, to Frank's point, this becomes very expensive very quickly.
Yeah, and it means you really aren't probably going to succeed till you rebuild some of that institutional knowledge. And so that stuff was acquired at great cost. And in many cases, it's gone because enterprises never valued how productive that was. And it's a shame.
Yep.
So, George, I'll punt to you, buddy.
Yeah, so capacity to change was kind of the next one we wanted to talk about. And fundamentally, what this is, are you walking the talk in a sense, right? In substandard ingredients, if you have not aligned your organization to effectively embrace this, it's hard because you're basically letting your staff or your teams battle amongst themselves for a limited set of either resources or how far they can advance. So clearly, if you're going to do this, it has this structure of, is the organization in action able to change? And if it's only in words, it's not going to work. And this, again, if you think about it coming from the top down, it's easy to have a goal or an edict. But if you don't have the supporting infrastructure around it in terms of these other ones that we have, prioritization and budget, the best you're going to have are individual pockets of test and learn. You may have individual pockets of success, but organizationally or being seen as an industry leader, not so much.
Yeah. And, here we're talking about the cost of strategic trust. And that's, I trust in the leadership team. There are many aspects of that. But when you come down to organizational change, one of the first questions humans want to know is this going to hurt me? And that's called psychological safety. They're going to understand if this is going to be good or bad for me. And if it's bad, because they don't trust the leaders, they are going to resist. Companies that have treated the people in a caring way, that have helped them grow, they've watched out for them, they had their back. Yeah, they're going to be fine with all the change. But, change resistant cultures where there is no trust between people and the leaders, they're not going to succeed at all. They're missing this such a fundamental ingredient that it's impossible to actually pull it off in my experience.
And remember, people do what they are incented to do. And that really is embodied in capacity to change. So if you're trying to get people to change, but your reward structure is the exact opposite of what that change entails, you're basically in substandard almost day one.
Mm-hmm. And now then we get to ruthless prioritization. Companies don't understand what kind of capacity they have to actually get the work done. That's a little different than the capacity to drive change. This is the ability to actually do the work. And you have so many months of capacity available. And you can extend that based on the culture, because people are much more productive in a culture where the full potential of those individuals being tapped. But companies have really done a very poor job trying to match what they're saying they're going to get done to what they can actually do. And so companies that are really good ruthlessly prioritize. They get what they can get done. They don't try to, boil the ocean, as that old saying goes, and they go after what's achievable for them. And so it's the disciplined pursuit of what is achievable. And this matters so much, because if these early efforts run into trouble and fail, it just puts a cloud over the whole transformation. People start to lose trust in the transformation. So, then the vibe of the organization starts to become negative. You're reporting some failure to the board that looks bad for management. And the prioritization allows you to actually grow your capacity as you're ruthlessly prioritizing more and more work into the organization, because you're growing capacity as you move on. And this is really important.
Yeah. And another side piece to this is realize that you already have an existing body of work that's being performed, scheduled, promised, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. The act of quote unquote introducing, an AI project as a quote unquote proof of concept or proof of value. Well, all of a sudden, if you were to really start stacking up the requirements of, where am I getting the data from? Who's going to create the extract? Who's going to validate the data? How am I going to create the underlying infrastructure? What infrastructure do I need? This becomes a significant project in of itself. And most organizations do not see the challenge. And oh, by the way, I've seen this too many times in my career, where the proof of concept is like, oh, that's a really great idea. How quick can you get it into production? Well, it overlooks or negates a lot of the issues and challenges that really need to be in place. So if you're not prioritizing this so that it aligns with the goals. And this is why you need that leadership commitment. This is where the failures, to me, this is one of the root causes of failures.
I totally agree with you. This is where things really start to derail quickly. And, we're going to talk next week about demand management, which is another element in this, because there's all sorts of demands in the enterprise. You're not just doing AI, as George said. And companies get a lot of this wrong. They've been getting it wrong for years, and they've never built really good discipline processes in these areas. They've never built great cultures. And that's what starts to catch up on you. Hey, George, I'm going to move on to the next slide.
Go.
And so, George, this is yours.
So this is part of, the offering, how we can help you, quote unquote, keep pace with all of these changes. There's a lot to do here. It ranges from just basic analysis down to establishing a vision, down to establishing, how much of this noise do I really need to be aware of? And that's basically a lot of what I do on a weekly basis through a variety of webinars, this one being one, and then my Sunday webinars being the other. So this is more of a reach out, to contact us collectively, because no one person can do this. It's really a team effort, but it's understanding how can you put the right controls and vision in place to make this successful.
Yeah, I mean, look, enterprise transformation is enterprise transformation. I've done quite a few of them over time, divisional, been involved in enterprise. Those learnings are incredibly valuable. And if you're venturing into this for the very first time, you're going to step on landmines. You can almost guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
Look, we try to always get something a little funny here to end with. So transformations require leaders. Actually, I got this off of medium.com just to give them credit. But here you can see these people are talking, hey, transformations require leaders. And one of the guys says, I'm a leader. The other guy says, being a manager doesn't make you a leader. And you can see what breaks out here. And it requires real leaders to run transformations. You've got to really empower people, build the right culture, be there to, encourage, energize, and do all the things that great leaders do that make organizations productive. And I think managers aren't going to make it in this.
Yep. So what do we got for next week?
So next week, we're going to go through these remaining recipe ingredient definitions. It'll be part 2. I hope you can join us and tune in. We have a show every Wednesday at 3:30. And so hopefully you're enjoying this. We've done quite a few AI episodes. George has joined us for the last few. And this, I hope we're adding a lot of value for you. We put a lot of time, thought, and energy into this, saying, how do you really sit down and calculate the cost of an enterprise-wide AI transformation? Where do you begin? How do you attack it? And so there's some, I think, valuable stuff you could take away from this. I hope you're enjoying it. And we hope to see you on our next episode. And please, we're looking to engage with everybody. And so please do comment, and we will get back to you. You can, even send George emails, put my email up.
Sure.
As well. But, feel free to comment. We're looking to engage the audience and really, really dig into this with you, because I think people have a lot of questions. This is big, and it's going to be challenging as you move from experimental AI into enterprise-wide AI.
Yep.
So, hey,